Debroy Committee recommendations. Debroy Committee was appointed by the Railway Ministry in order to give guidelines for mobilization of resources for major railway projects and restructuring of Railway Ministry and the Railway Board. The committee report is considered to be important for it contains comprehensive recommendations on the policies and programs for the entire railway setup in India. A committee headed by the economist has recommended a corporatization of the Railway Board and the separation of roles of policy making, regulations and operations, suggesting that the Ministry of Railways be only responsible for policy making. According to the committee, there should be clear division of responsibility between the Government of India and the railway organization. The ministry will only be responsible for policy for the railway sector and the parliamentary accountability, and it will give autonomy to the Indian Railways. Now, the background for this was the Railway Ministry had in September 2014 constituted this 18-member committee for the mobilization of resources for the major railway projects and restructuring of railways under the then Railway Minister. The Debroy Committee's recommendations now lay down the directions for the reforms that are required to turn around this national carrier. Now let us study the major recommendations of the Debroy Committee. Now, independent regulator for the railway. While the need for an independent regulator for determining tariffs has been raised before, the committee proposed that the setting up of a Railway Regulatory Authority of India statutorily with an independent budget. This has been recommended because of the shift of regulatory responsibility from the government to an independent regulator, and that is required because the private sector will come in if there is a fair and open access to the infrastructure. Now, this independent regulator shall ensure fair and open access and set access charges. It will also establish tariffs in cases where the market fails to discover a price. It will also adjudicate disputes between the track owning organization and the train operators and between the competitors. This regulator hopefully will make fair and open access a reality and open up both freight and passenger trains in competition with the Indian Railways. This is supposed to be crucial for providing a level playing field to the private sector, which has been reluctant to enter this sector. One important aspect has been the merging the railway budget with the general budget. The committee has recommended progressively phase out the practice of separate railway budget by merging with the general budget, and also ensure increases in passenger fares, and they are accompanied by better passenger services and amenities. Corporatization of the Railway Board has been one of the key recommendations of the Debroy Committee. According to the committee, the Railway Board should function like a corporate board for railways. The chairman of the Railway Board should be like a chief executive officer. Composition of the Railway Board should be changed to 5 members, namely traction and rolling stock, passenger and freight business, human resources and stores, finance and PPP, and also infrastructure, and 2 independent experts should be incorporated in this. Decentralization is another important area which the committee has dealt with. It has suggested decentralization of decision-making powers of the committee, and it should be headed by each zone, the general manager, and he should be fully empowered to take all necessary decisions without reference to the railway board. Within the revenue budget, financial outlay, the zonal railways should have full powers to expenditure, reappropriation and sanctions, and it should be subject to meeting its proportionate earning target. Now, private sector participation has been one of the key areas the committee has recommended. According to the committee, the larger thrust of the recommendation of the committee was to make the railway attractive for private sector participation. Apart from creation of an independent regulator and corporatization, the Debroy committee recommended that the railways should move away from the non-core activities like production and construction, leaving room for the private entry. It suggested separation of railway track from rolling stock with two independent organizations responsible for this. Private sector participation can be implemented in the form of service contract, management contract, leasing to the private sector, concessions, joint venture, and private ownership. Committee also suggested the formation of a railway infrastructure company in the form of a special purpose vehicle, and this special purpose vehicle will own the railway infrastructure that is created. The creation of such railway infrastructure company makes the market for operating trains contestable. One of the key concepts the Debroy committee has put forward is the Cooperative Federalism social cost accounting. The Debroy committee seeks a reallocation of the social cost and to reduce its burden on the cash-strapped transporter, that is the railways. It recommends a cleaner bearing of the subsidy burden of the national project on a cost-sharing basis between the union government and the state governments on one side and the Indian Railways on the other. It further recommends a financial assistance from the state governments to the railways for uneconomic branch lines, and also suburban passenger services or joint ventures with the state governments. Suburban railways should ideally be given to the state governments and via the joint venture route, and until that is done, the cost of the low suburban fares must be borne by the state government on a 50-50 basis. There should be alternative funding according to the committee. The measures suggested in this include tapping multilateral funding agency. For example, take out a financing by long-term funds, a long-term bullet bond or a zero coupon bond, and a joint ventures with the state governments for suburban railway. It also suggests leveraging railways assets to raise funds such as monetization of land. The committee proposes to set up an investment advisory committee that will include experts, investment bankers, and representatives of SEBI, RBI, IDFC, and other financial institutions. Transition to commercial accounting is another important aspect the committee has dealt with. In this, the committee says the process of accounting in Indian Railways is very complicated. It is impossible to figure out what the rate of return on a project is. Therefore, the report recommended refinements in the way Indian Railways prepares and the maintenance of account and cost its business, activities and services. The financial statements of Indian Railways need to be redrawn, and it should be consistent with the principles and norms nationally and internationally accepted standards. Casting accounts in standard commercial accounting format and making appropriate financial disclosures are necessary. This would only facilitate prospective investors in assessments of the risk and decision on their possible investment in the Indian Railways. The committee has also made significant recommendations on the streamlining of recruitment and human resource processes in the railways. At present, there are 8 organized Group A services in the Indian Railways. Deployment to these services is by direct recruitment by the UPSC, that is Civil Service Examination and Engineering Examinations, and also by promotion of Group B officers of the department. There is also a small but significant element of recruitment of mechanical engineers through the special class railway apprentices examination, and that is followed by training. According to the committee, the 8 services can be broadly categorized into 2 bigger groups, that is technical and non-technical services. Indian Railway should be consolidated and should merge the existing 8 organized Group A services into 2 services, that is the Indian Railway Technical Service, comprising of the existing 5 technical services, that is IRSE, IRSSE, IRSEE, IRSME and IRSS, and the Indian Railway Logistics Service, that is IRLOC, comprising 3 non-technical services. To summarize, the zonal construction company should be brought under the single umbrella of other public sector units to speed up a project execution. Now, there have been too many zones and the divisions need a rationalization, and there is a need to decentralize. The divisions must be treated as independent business units, and the zonal head should be empowered to take decisions within the policy framework without having referred to the railway board, and the zones should be financially independent, and the big stations should be managed by gated officers and designated as station managers, and a railway authority of India should be constituted, and it should be independent of the railway ministry, and it should have a separate budget and statutory backing. The regulator will have a quasi-judicial powers to ensure the level playing field for the private players.